The day Zelda Crawford learned what gentleness felt like was the day she watched a stranger calm a spooked horse with nothing but quiet words and patient hands. And she realized her entire marriage had been a study in cruelty. It was spring of 1884 in Nogales, Arizona Territory, a dusty border town where the heat could kill a man as quickly as a bullet, and Zelda had survived both. The bruise on her cheekbone was yellowing now, a sickly green that matched the color of new mesquite leaves. She stood outside Morrison's General Store with her basket of flour and beans, watching the commotion across the dirt road where a magnificent chestnut mare was rearing and pawing at the air. 3 men shouted and yanked at the rope around her neck, their faces red with exertion and anger. Her husband Marcus would have beaten that horse. He beat everything that did not immediately bend to his will, including her. 5 years of marriage had taught Zelda that Marcus Crawford knew only one language, and it was spoken with fists and fury. In spring, when the wildflowers bloomed and other couples walked together in the lengthening evenings, Marcus would come home drunk and mean, finding fault with everything from her cooking to the way she looked at him. Summer brought no relief, only more heat to fuel his temper. Fall harvests meant more money for whiskey, and winter cold made him vicious as a trapped animal. The stranger appeared from the livery stable, a tall man in worn leather chaps and a hat that had seen better days. He moved with the kind of confidence that did not need to announce itself. Even from across the street, Zelda could see he was younger than Marcus, perhaps 25 to her 23 years, with broad shoulders and a lean build that spoke of hard work rather than hard drinking. "Let her be," his voice carried across the street, deep and calm as still water. "This ain't your concern, stranger," one of the men shouted back. "It is now." The cowboy approached the panicking horse, but unlike the other men, he did not grab for the rope. Instead, he simply stood there, hands at his sides, and began speaking in low tones Zelda could not quite hear. The men stepped back, perhaps sensing something in his demeanor that suggested crossing him would be unwise. Zelda watched, transfixed, as the mare's wild eyes began to settle. The cowboy still had not touched her. He just kept talking, his posture relaxed, his movements slow and deliberate. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, the horse lowered her head and took a tentative step toward him. His hand came up gradually and rested on her neck. The mare did not bolt. "What are you staring at?" Zelda jumped, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus had appeared beside her, his breath already sour with whiskey, though it was barely past noon. His fingers dug into her upper arm with the precision of long practice, finding the bruise he had left there 2 days ago. "Nothing. I was just waiting for you." "Then stop gawking like a fool and get home. Dinner better be ready when I get there." He released her with a small shove that nearly made her drop her basket. Zelda hurried toward their small adobe house on the edge of town, her arm throbbing. But she could not help glancing back once more at the stranger and the now calm horse. He was running his hand along her flank, checking for injuries, his touch gentle as summer rain. Something in Zelda's chest ached with a longing she could not name. The house was stifling when she entered, heat trapped within thick walls despite the relative coolness of the spring day. She set about preparing dinner with practiced efficiency, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind wandered back to that scene in the street. The way the cowboy had not forced anything, the patience in every line of his body, the understanding that fear could not be beaten out of a creature, only replaced with trust. Marcus came home late, which was both a blessing and a curse. Dinner had dried out waiting for him, which meant trouble. "This is what you serve me." He swept his plate off the table. It shattered against the adobe wall, beans and dried beef spattering across the floor Zelda had scrubbed that morning. 5 years I have kept a roof over your head and you cannot even cook a decent meal. I am sorry. I can make something fresh. You are always sorry. His hand shot out faster than a striking snake, catching her jaw. The force snapped her head to the side. Sorry does not feed a man. Sorry does not give me sons. What good are you? She had learned not to answer questions like that. Any response was the wrong one. She stood still as a rabbit before a wolf, waiting to see which way he would go. But Marcus was not quite drunk enough yet for a real beating. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from the shelf and threw himself into his chair. Clean that up and get out of my sight. Zelda swept the broken plate, scrubbed the wall, and retreated to the tiny bedroom. Through the thin door, she could hear Marcus drinking steadily, muttering to himself about ungrateful wives and his bad luck. She lay on the bed they shared and stared at the ceiling beams, counting her breaths the way she had learned to do when the walls felt too close and her life felt too small. Sleep came fitfully, and with it, dreams of horses running free across open desert, no ropes to bind them. Morning brought Marcus's hangover, which meant he left early without breakfast or comment. Zelda moved through her chores mechanically, sweeping, washing, mending. The bruise on her jaw was darker today. She would need to powder it before going into town again. Not that anyone would say anything. In a place like Nogales, a man's business with his wife was his own affair. She was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats. 2 riders passed on the road, and one of them was the stranger from yesterday. In daylight, she could see him more clearly. The dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar, the strong line of his jaw, the way he sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle. He was talking to his companion, an older man with a gray beard, and then his gaze swept across the properties lining the road and landed on her. Their eyes met for perhaps 2 seconds. His gaze dropped to her bruised face and something flickered across his expression. Not pity, exactly. Recognition, maybe. Or anger on her behalf. Then they were past, and Zelda realized she had been holding a wet shirt so tightly that water was running down her arms. She did not see the stranger again for 3 days, and in that time, Marcus was true to form. On the second night, he came home in a fury because he had lost at cards. The black eye he gave her was accompanied by a lecture about how she brought him bad luck, how his life had been better before her, how she was a millstone around his neck. She absorbed it all, as she had learned to do, finding that quiet place inside herself where his words could not quite reach. The blows were harder to escape, but those eventually ended too. On the 3rd day, with her eye swollen nearly shut, Zelda decided she could not bear the walls of her house any longer. She needed supplies anyway, or so she told herself. Really, she just needed to see something other than Marcus's hateful face and the prison of their home. The spring sun was kind despite the heat, and the walk into town center cleared some of the fog from her mind. She kept her head down as she walked, aware of the glances from other townspeople. Most looked away quickly. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house met her eyes and gave her a small nod of acknowledgement, nothing more. What could she say? What could anyone say? Morrison's general store was busy with the afternoon trade. Zelda waited her turn, examining the canned goods with an attention they did not warrant, anything to avoid conversation. She was so focused on appearing invisible that she did not notice the man beside her until he spoke. "Excuse me, madam. Could you tell me if Mr. Morrison carries saddle soap?" The voice was the same one she had heard calming the horse. Zelda looked up and found herself face to face with the stranger. Up close, she could see his eyes were hazel, more green than brown in the light from the store windows, and there was a kindness in them that made her throat tight. "I believe it is in the back by the tack," she managed to say. "Thank you kindly." He did not move immediately. His gaze traveled over her face, taking in the black eye, the fading bruise on her jaw, the split lip she had not mentioned. "Madam, forgive me for being forward, but are you all right?" No one had asked her that in 5 years. No one. "I am fine, thank you." The lie tasted bitter. "I do not mean to overstep." His voice was quiet, pitched for her ears alone. "But if you ever need help, my name is Ethan Olsen. I am working at the Johnson Ranch about 3 miles north of town. If you need anything at all, you could send word." "That is very kind, but I am fine." She forced herself to move away, to put distance between herself and this dangerous kindness. Because kindness was dangerous when you were Marcus Crawford's wife. Kindness made you hope, and hope was the cruelest thing of all. But as she completed her purchases and left the store, she found herself turning his words over in her mind like smooth stones. Ethan Olsen. The Johnson Ranch. 3 miles north. She should forget it. She should go home and cook dinner and survive another day, another season, another year. That was what wives did. That was what she had been taught, except she could not stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, with concern rather than contempt. The way he had helped that horse, not with force but with patience. The way he had spoken to her like she mattered, like her welfare was worth asking about. When Marcus came home that night, he was in a better mood. He had won at cards enough to cover his recent losses and then some. He was not quite kind, but he was not cruel either, and Zelda recognized this for what it was, the eye of the storm. These periods of relative calm never lasted long. She had learned to read the signs, the way his jaw tightened, the way his drinking increased, the way he looked at her like she was something that had spoiled. Summer would be here soon, and with it, the worst of his temper. May turned to June, and the heat settled over Nogales like a wool blanket. The days stretched long and brutal, and Marcus's mood deteriorated in direct proportion to the rising temperature. He was working less, drinking more, and finding new reasons to be angry. The money from his card game winnings was gone, spent on whiskey and gambling, and whatever else he did in town while she waited at home. Zelda saw Ethan Olsen twice more in passing, once riding through town with a string of horses, once at the livery stable when she was returning the cart Marcus had borrowed. Each time, he tipped his hat to her, his eyes asking questions his mouth did not voice. She nodded back and kept walking, but his presence in her world felt like a candle in a dark room, small but significant. The night everything changed started like so many others. Marcus came home drunk and angry, looking for a fight. But this time, his rage was different, more focused, more dangerous. He had heard something in town, some comment or joke about his wife that had lodged in his mind like a burr. "Who is the cowboy?" he demanded before he had even closed the door. Zelda's blood turned cold. "What cowboy?" "I do not know what you mean. Do not lie to me." His hand shot out, not to hit her but to grab her hair, wrenching her head back. "Billy Martin said he saw you talking to some cowboy at Morrison's, said he was making eyes at you. He asked me where the saddle soap was. That is all, I swear it." "You swear?" Marcus's laugh was ugly. "You swear on what? You have no honor to swear on. You are my property and you have been making a fool of me." "No, Marcus, I have not. I would never." But he was beyond listening. His fist caught her in the stomach, driving the air from her lungs. She doubled over, gasping, and he hit her again, this time across the face. The room spun. She tasted blood. What followed was the worst beating she had ever endured. Marcus was methodical, his rage cold and calculating. He hit her body where bruises would not show, her ribs, her stomach, her back. When she tried to curl into a ball, he kicked her. When she cried out, he told her to shut up, or he would give her something to really cry about. At some point, she stopped feeling it. Her mind separated from her body, floating somewhere near the ceiling, watching this happen to someone else. This was not her life. This could not be her life. When Marcus finally exhausted himself, he stood over her, breathing hard. "You are lucky I do not kill you. Remember that. You are alive because I allow it." He stepped over her body and went to bed. Zelda lay on the floor for a long time, watching the moonlight move across the wall. Every breath was agony. She thought at least 2 of her ribs were broken, maybe more. Her face felt like it belonged to someone else, swollen and hot. But worse than the physical pain was the certainty that had crystallized in her mind during the beating. If she stayed, Marcus would kill her. Maybe not tonight, maybe not next week, but eventually. She had seen it in his eyes, that cold fury that had no bottom to it. He would go too far one night and she would not get up from the floor. She had to leave. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. Leave and go where? She had no family, no money, no skills beyond keeping house. The law would not help her. A wife belonged to her husband for better or worse until death parted them. If she ran and Marcus found her, he would make that beating look like a kindness. But she could not stay. Zelda waited until Marcus's snores rattled through the house. Then slowly, agonizingly, she got to her feet. Every movement was torture, but she forced herself to walk to the bedroom, to the small trunk at the foot of the bed where she kept her few possessions. She packed quickly and quietly, her Sunday dress, an extra skirt, her mother's Bible, the silver hairbrush that had been a wedding gift from an aunt. She found Marcus's purse where he had dropped it on the table and took half the coins inside. It was probably more than she deserved by law, but less than she had earned through 5 years of hell. She left just before dawn, when the sky was gray and the town was silent. Every step away from that house felt like a resurrection. She did not know exactly where she was going, only that it was away north, toward the only name and place that had been offered as refuge, the Johnson Ranch. Ethan Olsen. It was a presumption to think he had meant his offer seriously, or that it still stood, or that he would be willing to help a woman who was still legally another man's wife. But it was the only hope she had. The walk was 3 miles, but in her condition, it took nearly 2 hours. The sun was well up by the time she stumbled up the long drive to the ranch house, and she was dizzy with pain and exhaustion. The ranch was bigger than she had expected, with a large barn, several outbuildings, and a sprawling adobe house with a covered porch. Horses grazed in the near pasture, and she could hear voices from behind the barn. She made it to the porch steps before her legs gave out. She sat down heavily, her vision swimming with black spots, and tried to catch her breath. Just for a moment. She would rest just for a moment. "Madam. Madam, are you all right?" The voice was young, concerned. Zelda forced her eyes open and saw a boy of about 15 staring at her with wide eyes. Behind him, running toward the porch, was Ethan Olsen. "Go get Mrs. Johnson," Ethan said to the boy without taking his eyes off Zelda. Then he was kneeling beside her, his face close to hers. "Mrs. Crawford, can you hear me?" She wanted to answer, but the words would not come. The world was tilting sideways. "I have got you," Ethan said, and then his arms were around her, lifting her as gently as if she were made of glass. The last thing she remembered before darkness took her was the feeling of being carried, and the strange, overwhelming relief of being held with care. When Zelda woke, she was in a bed she did not recognize, in a room filled with soft afternoon light. Her body was a symphony of pain, but she was clean, dressed in a nightgown that was not hers, and covered with a quilt that smelled like lavender. She turned her head carefully and saw a woman sitting in a chair by the window, mending a shirt. "Oh, you are awake." The woman set down her sewing and came to the bedside. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair and a face that had seen its share of sun and hardship, but her eyes were kind. I am Mary Johnson. You are at my ranch. Ethan brought you in this morning. How do you feel?" "Sore," Zelda managed. Her voice was a croak. "I am sorry to impose." "Nonsense. You needed help and we are glad to give it." Mary poured water from a pitcher on the bedside table and helped Zelda drink. "You have got 2 cracked ribs as far as I can tell. The bruising is extensive." "What happened to you?" Zelda did not answer immediately. What could she say? But Mary's face was patient, and something about her calm demeanor made the truth spill out. "My husband. He beat me. He has been beating me for 5 years, but last night was the worst. I thought he might kill me. So I left." Mary's expression did not change, but her hand, which had been resting on the quilt, curled into a fist. "You did the right thing. A man has no right to treat his wife that way. Law or no law, he will come looking for me. Let him come. He will find you are under the protection of this ranch, and we do not take kindly to men who beat women." Mary stood and walked to the door. "Rest now. I will bring you some broth in a bit. You are safe here, Mrs. Crawford. You have my word." Over the next few days, Zelda learned what safety felt like. The Johnsons ran a horse ranch, breeding and training animals for sale throughout the territory. Mary was the heart of the operation, managing the business side, while her husband Thomas, a gruff but good-hearted man in his 60s, handled the breeding program. They employed 5 men, including Ethan, who Mary explained was their best horse trainer. "That boy has a gift," Mary said as she helped Zelda sit up to eat on the 3rd day. "The horses trust him like they trust no one else. He has only been with us since March, but I do not know what we would do without him now." "Where did he come from?" "Montana, originally. His father had a ranch up there, but he died a few years back. Ethan has been working his way south, learning from different ranches. He will have his own place someday. Mark my words." Zelda thought about Ethan Olsen with his patient hands and quiet voice. "He was very kind to me. He is a good man, the kind that is getting rarer these days." Mary gave her a knowing look. "He has asked about you every morning, wants to know how you are healing." Warmth flooded Zelda's chest, followed quickly by guilt. She was still married. She had no right to feel anything about any man other than Marcus. But feelings, she was learning, did not much care about rights. On the 4th day, she was strong enough to leave the bed. Mary helped her dress in borrowed clothes, a simple work dress that was a bit too large, and walked with her out to the porch. The late June sun was brilliant, and the ranch spread out before her like a promise. In the nearest corral, she could see Ethan working with a young colt, using the same gentle persistence she had witnessed that first day in town. "He does that every afternoon," Mary said. 3 hours minimum with the young ones. Never raises his voice, never loses his patience. Thomas says it takes twice as long as breaking them the old way, but the horses Ethan trains never spook, never bolt. They trust people. Zelda watched Ethan move around the colt, his movements slow and predictable. The colt, which had been skittish when the session started, was now following him around the corral like a puppy. I have never seen anything like it. Most people have not. It takes a special kind of strength to be that gentle. A lot of men think strength is about force, about dominating. But real strength is about control, about choosing to be gentle when you have the power to be otherwise. The words struck Zelda like a bell. Marcus had always equated strength with violence, control with fear. He had tried to break her the way men broke horses in the old way, with cruelty and force. But he had never understood that all he created was fear, not respect, not trust, not love. Never love. Ethan looked up and saw them on the porch. He said something to the colt, patted his neck, and walked toward the house. As he approached, Zelda could see the concern in his face. "Mrs. Crawford, it is good to see you up and about. How are you feeling?" Much better, thanks to you and the Johnsons. I owe you my life, Mr. Olsen. You owe me nothing. I am just glad you are safe. He glanced at Mary, then back at Zelda. I do not mean to worry you, but I thought you should know. Your husband has been in town asking about you. He went to the sheriff. Zelda's heart clenched with fear. What did the sheriff say? Nothing useful. He asked around, but no one has told him anything. Folks in Nogales might not interfere in a marriage, but they are not much inclined to help a man like Marcus Crawford find his wife either. He will figure it out eventually. He knows I met you in town. Let him figure it out, Ethan said, and there was steel beneath the gentleness in his voice. You are under the Johnsons' protection, which means you are under mine as well. If Marcus Crawford wants to take you back, he will have to go through me first. Mary touched Zelda's arm. Why do not I give you two a moment? I need to check on dinner anyway. She disappeared into the house before Zelda could protest. Ethan gestured to the chairs on the porch. May I sit with you for a bit? They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the horses in the pasture. Finally, Ethan spoke. I want you to know that you can stay here as long as you need. The Johnsons have already said so, and I agree. You do not have to go back to that life. But I am still married. Legally, I am his property. The law is not always right, Ethan said quietly. What he did to you was wrong. What he has been doing to you for 5 years was wrong. You have a right to be safe. You do not understand how things work here. A man can do what he wants with his wife. The sheriff will not help me. The court will not help me. If I refuse to go back to Marcus, I will be seen as a disobedient wife, a troublemaker, and you will be accused of harboring another man's wife, maybe worse. I am willing to take that risk. Why? The question burst out of her. Why would you risk anything for me? You do not even know me. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, almost sad. When I was 10 years old, my father hired a couple to work on our ranch. The husband worked in the stables and the wife helped my mother with the house. I remember the wife. Her name was Sarah. She was always jumpy, always apologizing for things that were not her fault. One day I saw bruises on her arms. When I asked my mother about it, she told me that some men hurt the women in their lives, and that it was the worst kind of cowardice. He paused, his jaw tightening. A few months later, Sarah's husband beat her so badly she could not get out of bed. My father wanted to throw him off the ranch, but Sarah begged him not to. She said her husband would kill her if she had nowhere to go. So my father helped them leave, but he made sure Sarah had money of her own and the name of a friend in another territory who would give her work without her husband. I do not know if she ever used it, but I have never forgotten the look on her face, that trapped, hopeless look. He turned to face Zelda, and his eyes were intense. When I saw you in Morrison's with that black eye, I saw that same look, and I promised myself that if you ever needed help, I would give it, no questions asked. No woman should have to live in fear of the man who is supposed to protect her. Tears burned in Zelda's eyes. She had spent so long believing that her situation was normal, that she deserved it somehow, that all wives suffered in silence. To hear someone say that it was wrong, that she had a right to safety, to gentleness, it cracked something open inside her chest. Thank you, she whispered. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, not talking, just being. And for the first time in 5 years, Zelda felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Marcus came to the ranch 3 days later. Zelda was in the kitchen with Mary, learning to make bread, when they heard the sound of a horse galloping up the drive. Mary looked out the window and her face hardened. That is him, is it not? Zelda only had to glance to confirm. Marcus sat his horse like a man going to war, his face flushed with anger even from a distance. Yes, Go to the back room and stay there. Lock the door. He will not leave without me. He will leave because I will tell him to leave. Now go." Zelda went, but she left the door cracked so she could hear. From her vantage point, she could see through the house to the front porch where Mary emerged to meet Marcus. Ethan appeared from the direction of the barn, along with Thomas and 2 other ranch hands. They ranged themselves behind Mary like a wall. Marcus dismounted and stomped up to the porch. "I am here for my wife." "Your wife is not here," Mary said coolly. "Do not lie to me, woman. I know she is here. Half the town saw that cowboy carrying her in." "Then half the town should have told you to leave her be. A man who beats his wife has no right to call her his own." Marcus's face turned purple. "What happens between a man and his wife is no business of yours. Zelda, get out here now." Zelda pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Every instinct screamed at her to obey, to go to him, to avoid making this worse. 5 years of conditioning were hard to overcome. "She is not here," Mary repeated. "And even if she were, she would not go with you. Now get off my property before I have my men remove you. You have no right to keep her from me. She is my wife. She is a human being who deserves to be treated with respect." Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You will not take her anywhere, Mr. Crawford. Not now, not ever." Marcus's hand went to the gun at his hip. Instantly, Thomas and the other ranch hands had their own weapons drawn. Marcus looked at the 4 guns aimed at him and slowly removed his hand from his weapon. "This is not over," he snarled. "The law is on my side. I will get the sheriff, and he will make you give her back." "You do that," Thomas said. It was the first time he had spoken, and his voice was like gravel. "But I have known Sheriff Thompson for 20 years, and I do not think he will be much inclined to help a man who beats women. Now get off my land before I forget I am a Christian man." Marcus looked at each of them in turn, his face twisted with impotent rage. "You are a whore, Zelda. Do you hear me? You are a filthy whore, and you will rot in hell for this." His voice carried through the house, and Zelda flinched. "Leave, now." Ethan's voice was hard as iron. Marcus spat on the ground, mounted his horse, and rode off at a gallop. But as he passed the house, he shouted back, "This is not over. You are still my wife." Zelda sank down to the floor, her whole body shaking. She heard the front door close, heard Mary's voice speaking in low tones to the men, heard footsteps approaching. Then Mary was there, kneeling beside her, pulling her into an embrace. "It is all right. He is gone. You are safe. He will come back. He will get the sheriff, or he will come at night, or he will wait until I am alone. He will not give up. Then we will not give up either. You are not alone anymore, Zelda. Do you understand? You are not alone." Mary was right about the sheriff. He came 2 days later, but his visit was perfunctory. He listened to Mary's account of Zelda's injuries and Thomas's assertion that Marcus Crawford was not welcome on the ranch. He tipped his hat and said he would look into the matter, but his tone suggested that looking into the matter would involve precisely nothing. "Between you and me," Sheriff Thompson said to Thomas as he was leaving. Zelda could hear them from the window where she stood watching. "I have known Marcus Crawford for 10 years. He is mean when he is sober and meaner when he is drunk. If his wife wants to leave him, I am not inclined to force her back. Law might say different, but the law is written by men who have never been beaten by someone twice their size. You keep her safe, and I will keep Crawford away as best I can." It was not a legal solution, but it was something. As June melted into July, Zelda began to find her footing in her new life. She helped Mary with the house, learned to cook meals for the ranch hands, and slowly regained her strength. The bruises faded, the ribs healed, and with them some of the fear. Not all of it. She still startled at loud noises, still had nightmares about Marcus finding her. But the constant, grinding terror of her marriage was gone, replaced by something tentative and unfamiliar: peace. She also saw more of Ethan. He took his meals with the other ranch hands in the bunkhouse, but often in the evenings, he would find reasons to stop by the main house. He would ask Mary a question about a horse or bring Thomas a message, and then he would linger on the porch, talking with Zelda if she was there. They spoke about small things at first: the weather, the horses, life on the ranch. But gradually the conversations deepened. She learned that he was 26, just 3 years older than her. His mother had died when he was 15, and his father 2 years later, leaving him to sell the Montana ranch and strike out on his own. He had worked on ranches in Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico before landing in Arizona. He had always loved horses, had a natural gift for understanding them. "My father used to say that horses are honest," Ethan told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "They do not lie about what they are feeling. If they are scared, they show it. If they trust you, they show that too. People could learn a lot from horses." "What do you mean?" "I mean that we spend so much time hiding what we really feel, pretending things are fine when they are not, smiling when we want to cry. Horses do not do that. They are true to themselves." Zelda thought about the years she had spent pretending her marriage was acceptable, hiding bruises, making excuses for Marcus. Sometimes hiding is the only way to survive. "I know," Ethan said gently. "I am not judging. I just think that when you are safe enough to stop hiding, when you are with people who will not hurt you for being honest, that is when you start really living." She looked at him, at the sincerity in his face, the kindness in his eyes. "Are you saying I am safe here?" "I am saying that I hope you know you are safe here, with the Johnsons, with me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Zelda felt her heart beating faster, felt something warm unfurling in her chest. This was dangerous territory. She was still married, still bound by law to a man who would kill her if he could. But she could not deny what she was feeling. She was falling in love with Ethan Olsen. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like waking up after a long sleep, like seeing colors after years of gray. She was not ready to name it out loud, not even to herself. But it was there, growing stronger every day. One morning in early August, Mary found Zelda in the kitchen staring at nothing, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. "What is on your mind, dear?" Zelda hesitated, then decided that if she could not be honest with Mary, she could not be honest with anyone. "I think I have feelings for Ethan." She expected shock or disapproval or a lecture about the sanctity of marriage. Instead, Mary smiled. "I know. Is it that obvious?" To someone who is looking, yes. "The way you watch him when he is working with the horses. The way you light up when he comes to the house. The way he looks at you like you are the sunrise." Mary sat down across from her. "I also think he has feelings for you. But I am married." "Legally, yes. Morally, I would argue that Marcus Crawford broke your marriage vows long before you left him. A husband is supposed to love and cherish his wife, not beat her. But I understand your conflict. The law does not see it that way. Even if the law did, even if I could divorce Marcus, what kind of woman falls in love while she is still married? What does that make me?" "Human," Mary said simply. "You spent 5 years in hell, Zelda. 5 years with a man who saw you as property, who hurt you in every way a person can be hurt. Now you have met a good man who treats you with kindness and your heart is responding. That does not make you wicked. It makes you alive." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks. "I am so confused. I know what I feel is real, but I also know it is wrong, or at least people would say it is wrong. And even if I did not care about that, what future could we have? Marcus will never agree to a divorce. I will be legally bound to him until one of us dies." "Then maybe," Mary said carefully, "the question is not what the law allows, but what you can live with. What kind of life do you want, Zelda? One where you follow every rule, stay legally married to a man who will never touch you again, and spend your days alone? Or one where you take a chance on happiness, even if society says you should not have it?" It was not a question Zelda could answer right away. She thought about it as she went about her chores, as she watched Ethan work with the horses, as she lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling. What did she want? For 5 years, she had wanted nothing but survival. Now, for the first time, she had the luxury of wanting more. She wanted love. She wanted gentleness. She wanted a partner who saw her as an equal, not a possession. She wanted Ethan, but wanting and having were two different things. The summer heat bore down on Nogales with relentless intensity. The horses moved slowly in the pastures, and even the usually energetic ranch hands dragged through their afternoon work. Zelda had taken to sitting on the porch in the early mornings and late evenings, the only times when the temperature was bearable. It was on one such evening, with the sun painting the sky in shades of orange and red, that Ethan approached her with an unusual hesitancy in his step. "Mrs. Crawford, could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course. And please call me Zelda. I think we are past formalities." He sat down beside her, removing his hat and turning it in his hands. For a long moment he did not speak, and Zelda waited, her heart beating faster with each passing second. "I need to be honest with you," he finally said. "These past 2 months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has been the best part of my days. I wake up looking forward to seeing you. I find excuses to come to the house just to talk to you. And I know I have no right. I know you are still legally married, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan, let me finish, please. I am falling in love with you, Zelda. I think I started falling that first day I saw you watching me with the horse. And I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this is wrong or impossible or foolish. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and I do not want to waste time hiding the truth. I love you, and if you feel anything at all for me, even a fraction of what I feel for you, I want you to know that I will wait as long as it takes. I will help you get a divorce, or we can leave Arizona and start over somewhere the law will not follow. Or if you want me to walk away and leave you in peace, I will do that too. Whatever you need, whatever you want, I am here." The words hung in the air between them like stars. Zelda felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of joy, of the overwhelming realization that someone loved her, not as property, not as a servant, but as a person, as herself. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been so afraid to admit it, so afraid of what it means, but I do. I love you, Ethan." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His touch was gentle, reverent. "Then we will figure out the rest together." They sat there as the sun set completely and the stars emerged, hands clasped. Two people who had found each other in the midst of chaos and cruelty, and were brave enough to reach for something better. But their peace was not to last. 2 weeks later, on a sweltering August afternoon, Marcus came back. This time, he did not come to the front door with demands. This time, he came with violence. Zelda was in the garden behind the house, picking vegetables for dinner. The ranch hands were out checking fences in the far pastures. Thomas and Mary had gone into town for supplies, and Ethan was in the barn working with a difficult mare. She was alone and unprotected, and Marcus had been watching long enough to know it. She did not hear him approach. The first indication she had that something was wrong was a hand clamping over her mouth and an arm wrapping around her waist, dragging her backward. "Did you think you could leave me?" Marcus's voice was hot and rancid in her ear, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Did you think I would just let you go?" Zelda struggled, but he was stronger, and he had the advantage of surprise. He dragged her toward the side of the house where his horse was waiting. Terror gave her strength, and she managed to bite down on the hand covering her mouth. Marcus cursed and released her for just a second, but it was enough for her to scream. "Ethan, help!" Marcus backhanded her across the face and she tasted blood. "Shut up!" But it was too late. Ethan came running from the barn, and when he saw Marcus with his hands on Zelda, something changed in his face. The gentle horse trainer vanished, replaced by something fierce and protective. "Let her go." His voice was deadly quiet. "She is my wife. I have every right to take her." "You have no rights here. Let her go, or I will make you let her go." Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you can take her from me, Cowboy? You think because she has been living under your roof, eating your food, that she is yours now? She will always be mine. I own her." "No one owns anyone." Ethan moved closer, his body coiled with tension. "This is your last warning. Let her go." Instead of complying, Marcus pulled Zelda tighter against him and drew a knife from his belt, pressing it to her throat. "You come any closer and I will cut her. I swear to God I will." Zelda felt the cold metal against her skin and went very still. She could see the calculation in Ethan's eyes, see him weighing options, looking for an opening. She wanted to tell him to be careful, wanted to tell him she loved him, wanted to say so many things. But the knife was too close and Marcus was too volatile. "You do not want to do this," Ethan said, his voice calm despite the situation. "If you hurt her, they will hang you. Is that what you want, to die for this? If I cannot have her, no one will." Marcus was beyond reason, lost in a spiral of rage and alcohol and wounded pride. "She humiliated me. She made a fool of me. She has to pay. She did nothing wrong. You drove her away by beating her. Any consequences you face are your own doing. Shut up." The knife pressed harder, and Zelda felt a sting as it broke skin. A trickle of blood ran down her neck. That was when Ethan moved. He was fast, faster than Zelda would have thought possible. He closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, his hand clamping around Marcus's wrist, forcing the knife away from Zelda's throat. At the same time, he drove his shoulder into Marcus's chest, breaking his grip on Zelda. She stumbled free, falling to the ground. The two men grappled for control of the knife. Marcus was wild, fighting with the desperation of a cornered animal, but Ethan was trained, his movements controlled and efficient. He twisted Marcus's wrist, and the knife fell to the ground. Then his fist connected with Marcus's jaw once, twice, a third time. Marcus went down hard. Ethan stood over him, breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding. "You do not touch her, ever again." Marcus spat blood and looked up with hatred in his eyes. "I will kill you for this. I will kill both of you." "No, you will not." The voice came from behind them. They all turned to see Sheriff Thompson dismounting from his horse, his gun drawn. Behind him were Thomas and Mary, just returned from town. "I think you have caused enough trouble, Crawford," the sheriff said. "I am arresting you for assault and attempted kidnapping. You will be spending some time in jail, and when you get out, if you are smart, you will leave this territory and never come back. She is my wife. You cannot arrest me for taking what is mine. I can and I am." The sheriff gestured to his deputy who had ridden up behind him. "Take him in." As Marcus was hauled away, still shouting threats and curses, Ethan turned to Zelda. She was still on the ground, her hand pressed to the cut on her neck, her whole body shaking with reaction. He knelt beside her and gently moved her hand to examine the wound. "It is not deep. You are going to be okay." His voice was soft, meant only for her. "I am so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have been watching. You saved my life." She reached up and touched his face, needing the contact to prove this was real. "He would have killed me if you had not been here." "I will always be here," Ethan said. "For as long as you want me, I will always be here." They stayed like that, kneeling in the dirt, holding each other, until Mary came and helped them both to their feet. Marcus was sentenced to 6 months in jail for assault. It was not enough, not nearly enough, but it was something. More importantly, Sheriff Thompson made it clear that when Marcus was released, he would be watching him. Any further attempts to harm Zelda would result in much more serious consequences. With Marcus behind bars, Zelda felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in years. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long began to ease. She still had nightmares, still flinched at sudden movements, but she was healing in ways that went beyond the physical, and her relationship with Ethan deepened. They were careful, aware that the town still saw her as a married woman. They did not flaunt their affection, did not give gossips ammunition. But within the boundaries of the ranch, away from prying eyes, they let themselves be honest about what they felt. Ethan courted her the way she had always dreamed of being courted, with gentleness and respect. He brought her wildflowers from the desert. He taught her to ride, patient and encouraging when she was afraid. He talked to her about his dreams of having his own ranch someday, a place where he could breed and train horses using his gentle methods. And in those conversations, she heard the unspoken invitation. He wanted her in that future. One evening in late September, when the oppressive summer heat had finally broken and the air carried a hint of autumn coolness, they walked out to the far pasture to watch the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, and the horses grazed peacefully around them. "I have been thinking," Ethan said, his hand warm around hers. "When Marcus is released from jail, he is going to come looking for you again. The sheriff can only do so much, and legally you are still his wife." Zelda's stomach clenched with fear. "I know. There are only a few ways to end a marriage: divorce, which Marcus will never agree to; annulment, which does not apply here; or widowhood." He paused, carefully choosing his words. "I am not suggesting anything violent, but Marcus is not a young man and he drinks hard. Nature may take care of the problem eventually. That could be years, I know, which is why I have another idea." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "We could leave, go to California or Oregon, someplace far from here where no one knows us. We could start over with new names if we had to. You could be free of him, truly free." "But what about the Johnsons? What about your work here?" Thomas and Mary would understand. "They want you to be happy. And as for work, I can find it anywhere. The only thing I cannot find anywhere is you." The offer was tempting, so tempting it hurt. To leave Arizona, to start fresh, to build a life with Ethan without the shadow of Marcus hanging over them. But it also meant giving up the first real home she had found since her parents died, the first people besides Ethan who had shown her unconditional kindness. "Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere without your agreement." They stood together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and Zelda leaned her head against his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. Whatever she decided, she knew this was no longer a choice between bad and worse. This was a choice between different kinds of good, different paths to happiness. And after 5 years of having no choices at all, that felt like a gift. As autumn deepened, Zelda came to a decision. She did not want to run. Not because she was not afraid of Marcus, but because running felt like letting him win. He had taken 5 years of her life, had made her a prisoner in her own home, had tried to kill her. If she let him chase her away from the first place she had ever felt truly safe, he would still be controlling her, just from a distance. She wanted to stay and fight. She told Ethan her decision one October morning while they were watching him work with a new colt in the training ring. He listened carefully, his face thoughtful. "If that is what you want, then I support you completely, but we need a plan. Marcus will be released in a few months, and when he comes back, we need to be ready." "What kind of plan?" "A legal one. I have been doing some reading, and there might be a way to get you a divorce without his consent. Arizona territory has a provision for divorce in cases of extreme cruelty. You would need evidence, witnesses, documentation of what he did to you. The town knows he beat me. Everyone saw the bruises. Knowing and testifying are different things. People do not like to get involved in marriage disputes. But maybe, with the sheriff's testimony and mine, and the Johnsons', we could build a case strong enough for a judge to grant a divorce. It is not guaranteed, but it is a possibility." Hope flared in Zelda's chest. "Do you really think it could work?" "I think it is worth trying. At the very least, it would put on official record what he did to you. That would make it harder for him to claim any rights to you." They consulted with Thomas and Mary, who agreed to testify. Sheriff Thompson, when approached, was initially hesitant but ultimately agreed that he would provide a statement about Marcus's violence and his arrest. With these commitments in hand, they hired a lawyer from Tucson, a young man named Daniel Porter who had a reputation for taking on difficult cases. "I will be honest with you," Porter told Zelda when they met in his temporary office in Nogales. "Divorces on grounds of cruelty are rare, and judges are reluctant to grant them. The prevailing attitude is still that a woman's place is with her husband, for better or worse. However, given the severity of your situation and the witnesses willing to testify, I think we have a reasonable chance. The fact that your husband is currently in jail for assaulting you certainly helps your case." The hearing was set for early December, just before Marcus's scheduled release. The intervening weeks were tense. Zelda threw herself into preparations, documenting every instance of abuse she could remember, dates and details that made her sick to recall but necessary for the case. Ethan was with her through all of it, a steady presence that kept her grounded when the memories threatened to overwhelm her. The day of the hearing arrived cold and clear. Zelda wore her best dress, borrowed from Mary, and stood before Judge Harrison with her lawyer beside her. Marcus was brought from jail to attend, his wrists in shackles, his face twisted with rage. The testimony was brutal. Zelda had to recount, in detail, the beatings, the threats, the constant fear. She had to describe the night he had broken her ribs, the day he had held a knife to her throat. She had to expose the most shameful, painful parts of her life to a room full of strangers. But she did it, her voice steady, her gaze never wavering. Ethan testified next, describing what he had witnessed, the condition Zelda had been in when she arrived at the ranch, the attack that had landed Marcus in jail. Sheriff Thompson corroborated the events, adding that Marcus Crawford was known in town as a violent drunk. Thomas and Mary spoke to Zelda's character and the visible evidence of abuse they had observed. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue that these were private marital matters, that Marcus had a right to discipline his wife as he saw fit, that Zelda had abandoned her husband without cause. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even the judge, a stern man in his 60s who had likely presided over hundreds of similar cases where he sided with the husband, seemed moved by the testimony. "Mr. Crawford," Judge Harrison said after all the witnesses had spoken, "the testimony I have heard today paints a picture of systematic cruelty that goes far beyond what any reasonable person would consider acceptable in a marriage. You beat your wife repeatedly, severely enough to break bones and cause permanent scarring. You threatened her life with a weapon. You attempted to kidnap her from a place of safety, These are not the actions of a husband but of a tyrant. She is my wife, Marcus shouted. The law says she belongs to me. The law says you are married, yes. But the law also recognizes that there are limits to what one human being can do to another, even within the bonds of marriage. Mrs. Crawford has more than met the burden of proof for extreme cruelty. He banged his gavel. I hereby grant this divorce. Zelda Crawford is no longer married to Marcus Crawford and is free to make her own decisions regarding her future. The words echoed through the courtroom like church bells. Zelda felt something enormous shift inside her, a weight she had been carrying for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. She was free, truly, legally free. Marcus lunged toward her, but the deputies held him back. You will pay for this, you hear me? You will pay. But his threats were empty now. He had no power over her anymore. Judge Harrison ordered him to be returned to jail to serve out the rest of his sentence, and after that, he was to leave the territory and not return. If he violated that order, he would face serious criminal charges. As Marcus was dragged from the courtroom, still shouting, Zelda turned to Ethan. He was watching her with such pride and love in his eyes that she felt tears spilling down her cheeks. It is over, she said. It is really over. It is over, he agreed. And now your life can begin. Outside the courthouse, Mary swept her into an embrace. Thomas shook her hand gruffly, his eyes suspiciously bright. Daniel Porter congratulated her on her courage and refused to accept more than a nominal fee for his work. Some cases are worth fighting for their own sake, he said. I am just glad I could help. That night, back at the ranch, they had a celebration. Mary cooked a feast, and the ranch hands raised glasses of cider to Zelda's freedom. It was a joyous occasion, made more so by the knowledge that it had been hard-won. Later, after the others had retired, Zelda and Ethan walked out to the barn to check on the horses. The night was cold but clear. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. I have something to ask you, Ethan said as they stood in the barn doorway, watching the horses settle for the night. I know this might be too soon. I know you have just gotten your freedom and you might want time to figure out who you are without being someone's wife. But I also know that life is uncertain, and I do not want to waste time being anything less than honest about what I want. He took her hands in his, and even in the dim light, she could see the nervousness in his face, the vulnerability. I love you, Zelda. I love your strength, your courage, your kind heart. I love the way you laugh when we work with the horses. I love the way you see the good in people even after everything you have been through. I want to spend my life with you if you will have me. I want to build a ranch with you, raise horses and maybe children if that is something you want. I want to wake up every morning and go to sleep every night knowing that you are beside me, not because any law says you have to be, but because you choose to be. He took a breath, and she could feel his hands trembling slightly in hers. Zelda Crawford, will you marry me? For a moment she could not speak. Emotion clogged her throat, joy so intense it was almost painful. This was nothing like her first proposal, when Marcus had offered marriage as if he were doing her a favor, when she had said yes because she had no better options. This was a man she loved asking her to choose him freely, asking if she wanted to build a life together based on mutual respect and affection. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, tender and reverent like she was something precious. And for the first time in her life, Zelda understood what it meant to be cherished. They were married in the spring of 1885, on a warm April day when the desert was in bloom. The wedding was small, just the Johnsons and the ranch hands, Sheriff Thompson and his wife, a few friends from town who had supported Zelda through her divorce. The ceremony was held at the ranch, under the sprawling arms of an old cottonwood tree with a visiting preacher officiating. Zelda wore a simple white dress that Mary had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers picked that morning from the desert. Ethan wore his best suit, which he had purchased especially for the occasion, and when she saw him waiting for her under the tree, the look of love and wonder on his face, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. The vows they spoke were traditional, but they meant something entirely different this time. When Ethan promised to love and cherish her, Zelda knew he meant it in his bones. When she promised to honor him, it was not out of legal obligation but genuine respect. They were choosing each other, freely and completely, and that made all the difference. After the ceremony, there was a celebration with food and music and dancing. Zelda danced with her new husband under the stars, his arms around her, his voice in her ear telling her how beautiful she was, how happy he was, how he would spend every day of his life trying to be worthy of her. "You do not have to try," she told him. "You already are." That night, in the small cabin Thomas and Mary had helped them build on the far edge of the ranch property, Zelda and Ethan began their married life. It was nothing like her first wedding night, which had been painful and frightening. This was gentle, exploratory, filled with patience and care. Ethan treated her like she was made of glass and gold, constantly checking that she was comfortable, that this was what she wanted. And when she assured him that it was, that she wanted him, that she loved him, the joy on his face was more valuable than any jewel. The first year of their marriage was the happiest of Zelda's life. They worked together on the ranch, training horses using Ethan's gentle methods. Word spread about their success, and people began bringing difficult horses from all over the territory for Ethan to work with. The income allowed them to start saving for their own ranch, the dream they both shared. Zelda discovered that she had a talent for working with horses too. Under Ethan's patient teaching, she learned to read their body language, to understand what they were communicating through their movements and expressions. She found a deep satisfaction in helping a fearful horse learn to trust again, seeing parallels to her own journey. They also grew closer as a couple, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building the kind of partnership that comes from mutual respect and affection. Ethan never raised his voice to her, never lifted a hand in anger. When they disagreed, which was rare, they talked it through like adults. He asked her opinion on ranch decisions and actually listened to her answers. He saw her as an equal, a partner, and treated her accordingly. In the summer of that year, Zelda realized she was pregnant. The news brought a complicated mix of emotions. She was happy, excited at the prospect of raising a child with Ethan, of building a family founded on love rather than fear. But she was also terrified. Her only model of fatherhood was Marcus, and though she knew Ethan was nothing like him, the fear lingered. Ethan, when she told him, was overjoyed, but he also saw the fear in her eyes and understood its source. "I will never hurt our child," he told her, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "I will never hurt you. That is a promise I made when we married, and it is a promise I will keep every day for the rest of my life. Our children will grow up knowing they are loved, knowing they are safe. They will never be afraid of their father." His words helped, but the real healing came over the following months as she watched him prepare for fatherhood. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving it carefully and sanding it smooth so there would be no rough edges. He talked to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about horses and the desert and how much they were already loved. He read books about child rearing, asked Mary for advice, and approached impending fatherhood with the same thoughtful care he brought to training horses. Their son was born in March of 1886, a healthy baby boy with Ethan's hazel eyes and Zelda's dark hair. They named him Samuel Thomas Olsen, after Ethan's father and Thomas Johnson. Holding her son for the first time, Zelda felt a surge of fierce, protective love unlike anything she had ever experienced. This child would never know the kind of fear she had known. This child would grow up surrounded by gentleness and strength, learning that power and kindness were not opposites but complements. Ethan was a natural father, patient and loving. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Samuel when he cried at night, and looked at his son with such wonder that it made Zelda's heart ache in the best way. Watching him with their baby, she finally understood what family was supposed to be. By the time Samuel was a year old, they had saved enough money to put a down payment on their own ranch. It was a small property, about 50 acres north of Nogales, with a modest house and barn that needed work. But it was theirs, and they poured all their energy into making it a success. Mary and Thomas helped however they could, donating breeding stock, offering advice, and watching Samuel when Zelda and Ethan needed to focus on the heavy work of building fences and repairing structures. The ranch hands from the Johnson place came over on their days off to lend a hand. Even Sheriff Thompson stopped by once with lumber he said he had no use for. "I am proud of you both," he told them. "You took a bad situation and turned it into something good. That takes courage." The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Ethan's reputation as a horse trainer continued to spread, and people came from as far as New Mexico and California to buy horses he had trained. Zelda managed the business side, keeping books, corresponding with clients, and handling sales. Together, they made a formidable team. In the summer of 1888, Zelda gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace Mary, after the Grace that had sustained them through hard times and Mary Johnson, who had been like a mother to Zelda. Grace had Zelda's blue eyes and Ethan's easy temperament. Samuel, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Life was not perfect. There were hard seasons when money was tight, illnesses that kept them up at night worrying, and the occasional difficult client or problem horse. But these challenges were manageable because they faced them together as partners. When Zelda felt overwhelmed, Ethan was there to share the load. When he doubted himself, she reminded him of his strengths. They had built something real and lasting, founded on mutual respect and love. They occasionally heard news of Marcus. He had left Arizona after his release from jail, drifted through Texas and New Mexico, and finally died in a saloon fight in El Paso in 1887. When Zelda heard the news, she felt nothing. Not relief, not sadness, not even closure. Marcus had been a chapter in her life, a terrible one, but it was closed now. She had moved so far beyond that time that his death was simply a footnote, a confirmation that the past was truly past. The children grew. Samuel became a serious boy who loved working with the horses, following his father around the ranch and mimicking his gentle handling techniques. Grace was more outgoing, fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified her parents. They had a third child in 1891, another boy they named Daniel Porter, after the lawyer who had fought for Zelda's divorce. Danny was a happy baby who grew into a happy child, always laughing, always finding joy in simple things. The ranch prospered. By 1895, they had expanded to 200 acres and employed 3 full-time ranch hands. They specialized in training ranch horses and gentle family mounts, animals that children could learn to ride on. It was satisfying work, and their reputation for quality and integrity meant they never lacked for clients. One evening in the fall of 1896, Zelda and Ethan sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set. The children were in bed, the horses were settled for the night, and the world was quiet. 12 years had passed since that spring day when Zelda had watched Ethan calm a frightened horse and realized her life did not have to be defined by cruelty. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, his hand finding hers in the familiar, comfortable way of long marriage. "Everything." "Nothing. I was remembering the first time I saw you with that mare in town. I was so sure that my life was set, that I would just endure until Marcus killed me or I died of despair. I never imagined this." She gestured at the ranch, at the life they had built. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "I did not imagine you either," Ethan said. "I thought I would just work on other people's ranches my whole life, never settling down, never finding anyone who understood me. Then I saw you standing outside Morrison's with that bruise on your face, and something in my heart recognized something in yours. Like we were meant to find each other." "You believe that? That we were meant to find each other?" "I do. I think sometimes people come into our lives at exactly the right moment, when we need them most. You needed someone to show you that not all men are cruel. I needed someone to remind me why gentleness matters, why it is worth being patient and kind even when the world says strength is about dominance. We saved each other." Zelda leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "I love you. I love you too. Always have, always will." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. From the house, they heard one of the children call out in their sleep, and Zelda started to rise, but the child settled before she could move. Everything was peaceful. This was what strength looked like, Zelda thought. Not fists and fury, not domination and fear. Real strength was choosing gentleness when you had the power to be cruel. It was patience when anger would be easier. It was love that uplifted rather than controlled. In every season of her first marriage, Marcus had shown her cruelty. Spring, summer, fall, winter, it made no difference. His violence was constant, reliable in its awfulness, but Ethan had shown her what gentle strength meant. He had shown her that power could be used to protect rather than harm, that a strong man was one who controlled himself rather than trying to control others. He had shown her that love was not about possession but partnership, not about fear but trust. Their marriage had weathered all seasons, spring's new beginnings, summer's heat, fall's harvest, winter's cold, and in every season it had grown stronger. Through children and challenges, through building a business and a life, they had remained partners, friends, lovers. They had created something beautiful out of the ashes of Zelda's first marriage, a family founded on respect and affection rather than law and custom. As they grew older, their love only deepened. The children grew up and started their own lives. Samuel took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, marrying a kind woman named Elizabeth and giving Zelda and Ethan their first grandchildren. Grace moved to Tucson and became a teacher, determined to educate young girls so they would have options beyond marriage. Danny worked as a horse trainer like his father, traveling throughout the Southwest and earning a reputation as good as Ethan's had been. Zelda and Ethan remained active on the ranch into their 60s, though they gradually handed over more responsibilities to the next generation. They spent their time with grandchildren, passed on their knowledge to Samuel and the ranch hands, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of each other's company. On a spring morning in 1904, 20 years after that first meeting in Nogales, Zelda woke to find Ethan already awake beside her, watching her with the same look of love he had worn on their wedding day. "Good morning, beautiful," he said. She laughed. "I am 63 years old and gray as a cloud. Beautiful is stretching it. You have always been beautiful to me. You always will be." They rose and dressed, walked out to watch the sunrise together as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was quiet, peaceful. They could hear Samuel and Elizabeth in the barn starting the morning chores, could see smoke rising from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands were making breakfast. "We built something good here," Zelda said. "We did," Ethan agreed. "Not just the ranch, but a family, a legacy. Our children know what love looks like. Our grandchildren will never know what it is to be afraid in their own homes. That matters. It matters more than anything." They stood together, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest, and watched the sun climb into the sky. The desert was blooming with spring flowers, bright splashes of color against the tans and browns of the landscape. Birds sang in the cottonwoods. A horse whinnied from the pasture. Zelda thought about the girl she had been, trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing her, believing that survival was the best she could hope for. She thought about the moment she had decided to leave, to walk away from everything she knew in search of something better. She thought about Ethan, patient and kind, showing her what it meant to be loved rather than owned. Her first husband had been cruel in every season, a constant source of pain and fear. But the cowboy had shown her what gentle strength meant, and in doing so, he had given her not just survival but a life worth living. They had built that life together, season by season, year by year, until it had grown into something strong and beautiful and lasting. And as the sun rose on another spring morning, Zelda knew that she would not change a single moment of the path that had brought her here, to this place, to this man, to this life they had created together. Every hardship had been worth it for the joy of standing beside him and watching the sunrise, knowing that they would face whatever came next as they had faced everything else, together, with gentleness and strength and love. That was the legacy they had built, the gift they would leave to their children and grandchildren. Not wealth or property, though they had earned both through hard work. Not reputation or social standing, though they were respected throughout the territory. The real legacy was the example they had set, showing that love could heal wounds, that gentleness was strength, that partnership was possible between equals. Their story became a legend of sorts in Nogales and the surrounding ranches. People told it to their daughters, as proof that leaving a bad marriage was possible, that there were good men in the world who would treat them with respect. They told it to their sons, as an example of what real strength looked like, what it meant to be a man of character. The Olsen ranch became known not just for quality horses, but for the people who ran it, for the love that was visible in every interaction between Ethan and Zelda, for the way they treated their employees and clients, and each other. As the years passed, Ethan and Zelda eventually slowed down further, content to sit on their porch and watch the work of the ranch continue without them. They saw more grandchildren born, watched them grow, and lived to see their first great-grandchild, a girl named Zelda Marie after her great-grandmother. Ethan died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1912 at the age of 74. Zelda woke to find him beside her, his face calm and peaceful, his hand still holding hers as it had for nearly 3 decades of marriage. The grief was intense, a physical pain in her chest, but alongside it was gratitude. She had been blessed with 28 years of genuine love, of partnership, of joy. Some people lived entire lives without experiencing what she and Ethan had shared. His funeral was attended by people from all over the territory, ranchers and townspeople, friends and former clients, all coming to pay respects to a man who had lived with integrity and kindness. Samuel gave a eulogy that captured his father's gentle spirit, his unwavering commitment to doing things the right way even when it was harder, his love for his family and his horses. Zelda lived another 6 years after Ethan's death. She stayed active, helping with the grandchildren, offering advice on the ranch, and writing down the story of her life so that future generations would know where they came from and what they had overcome. She wanted them to understand that strength was not about never being knocked down, but about getting back up. That love was a choice you made every day, not just a feeling. That gentleness was power channeled with wisdom. She died in the spring of 1918, 77 years old, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were about Ethan, how much she had loved him, how much she was looking forward to seeing him again. And then she closed her eyes and went to sleep, a small smile on her face. They buried her next to Ethan on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates, but they did not need elaborate monuments. Their legacy was all around in the thriving ranch, the happy family, the gentle way horses were trained there, the love that had been the foundation of it all. The story of Zelda and Ethan became family legend, passed down through generations. It was told at weddings as an example of what marriage should be, at baptisms as a reminder that people could break cycles of abuse and create something better, at family gatherings as proof that love could triumph over cruelty. The Olsen family grew and spread throughout Arizona and beyond, but they all knew the story of their ancestors who had found each other in the hardest of circumstances and built something beautiful together. The ranch itself continued for generations, eventually passing out of family hands but maintaining its reputation for quality and ethical treatment of animals. The old house where Ethan and Zelda had raised their children was preserved, and people would sometimes visit to see where the famous love story had unfolded. But the real legacy was not in the land or the buildings. It was in the hearts of all the people whose lives had been touched by Zelda and Ethan's example. It was in the woman who found the courage to leave an abusive marriage because she had heard Zelda's story. It was in the man who chose patience over anger because he remembered how Ethan had treated his horses and his wife. It was in every child who grew up knowing that love meant safety, not fear, because their parents had learned that lesson from the generation before. Zelda Crawford had started her adult life as a woman trapped by cruelty, believing she had no options, no hope, no future worth living for. Marcus had been cruel in every season, his violence as reliable as the changing weather, and she had endured it because she believed she had no choice. But then, a cowboy with gentle hands and patient eyes had shown her what strength really meant. Ethan Olsen had demonstrated that power was not about domination but protection, that a strong man controlled himself rather than trying to control others, that true courage was choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. He had loved her with a love that healed rather than harmed, that built up rather than tore down, that gave freedom rather than taking it. Together, they had created a life that mattered, a family that thrived, a legacy that endured. They had proven that people could overcome terrible beginnings and build beautiful endings. That love was real, that gentleness was strength, that choosing each other freely was the greatest gift two people could give. And in every season for the rest of their lives, through spring's renewal and summer's heat, through fall's abundance and winter's rest, through joy and sorrow, ease and hardship, health and sickness, they had loved each other with the kind of love that changes the world one heart at a time. That was their story, their triumph, their legacy. And it lived on long after they were gone, a testament to the power of gentle strength and the enduring nature of true love.